The Indianapolis Colts have been wildly disrespected by yet another NFL analyst, and I don't know why we're still shocked about this. It doesn't seem like a lot of people are giving the Colts their due, especially after a really good performance, and yet it seems like teams like the Texans are getting like the highest praise. That might just be coming from a biased Colts fan. What's going on? I'm Elijah from Sports Talk Indy, where we cover all things Colts every single day. And today we are talking about an article that came out from Pete Prisco, who's giving his top 100 NFL players. And this shouldn't be something, yet I feel like it's somewhat designed to be rage bait at this point. But there's a lot of them that are like, yeah, that makes sense. You can probably guess Patrick Mahomes, number one. There's no denying that. I'm not upset about that as a Colts fan. Myles Garrett, number two, being the best defensive player. Again, not really upset about that. Trent Williams being the best. That's crazy at 36 that he's still that good as a offensive tackle. Again, there's no denying that. And in fact, there's not a lot of denying any of the top 10. It goes on to say Tyreek Hill at wide receiver, TJ Watt, Josh Allen, the quarterback, Justin Jefferson, Christian McCaffrey, Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa. Again, there's no denying any of that. But there are some players off this list, and I think that this is important to note. Not a single Indianapolis Colt player was listed in this entire top 100. Now, I know that the Colts are coming back up, and I know that they are still a new team-ish, but this still is surprising and shocking, disappointing, to say the least, because I do feel that while the Colts, again, are and they're coming up, there are at least 5 players that I can think of that should be in the top 100, and I have concrete evidence to prove this. So I went through this list and went and listed who I believe players who shouldn't have made the top 100 from the Indianapolis Colts. Michael Pitman, I understand, can be a little bit, that one, tricky. Get that. But at least Quentin Nelson, I mean, at the very minimum, Quentin Nelson, being one of the best guards in football, and one of the best in recent history. I think Quentin Nelson, especially as he's starting to come back 2023, looked really good for him. I also tried to compare Quentin Nelson's stats to other offensive guards in this. Everyone else, I was able to go stat for stat and do play-by-play. Offensive line is such a weird position to try and get comparisons on. So we're going to believe in our hearts that Quentin Nelson should be in the top 100, but there's not really an easy way to prove that without going through and checking block for block and all of that. And even then, it depends on your edge rusher. So in my personal opinion, it's really hard to gauge offensive lineman, but I do feel like Quentin Nelson should be in this top 100. But then you got DeForest Buckner, Jonathan Taylor, Kenny Moore, and then one that I actually found out by doing this, Zaire Franklin, easy should have cracked the top 100 based on the metrics that they're using to gauge this top 100. Again, this isn't the top 100 that's like player to player, though I don't think the Colts are going to get their flowers on that one either. But I do think that this is important to note these specific players. And the first one to go over, again, there's no denying this like top 10, Myles Garrett, Mahomes, Trent Williams. But the first one I want to go over is Zaire Franklin. And the one that they have listed at number 97 would be Lavonte David. And again, no disrespect to any of these guys, but when you look at Lavonte David versus Zaire Franklin, excuse me, Zaire Franklin appeared in one more game than Lavonte David. Lavonte David had more sacks, but Zaire Franklin had over 21 more tackles and one more missed fumble than Lavonte David. So again, based it on, like, he had every single stat line except for sacks, excuse me. Based on this, Zaire Franklin beats Lavonte David all day, and yet went unranked. Let's go over to the next one, which would be Kenny Moore, who I think, again, one of the best nickel corners in football, if not the best. He's the highest paid nickel corner. And the one that they had Derek Stingley ranked at 80. And again, stat for stat, Kenny Moore had a better year aside from interceptions alone, better pass deflections. He had more games. He had more interceptions returned for touchdowns, more sacks, 40 more tackles. You're telling me that in the games that Derek Stingley missed due to injury, that he had 40 more tackles? No, not a chance. Kenny Moore beats Derek Stingley, and I think that Kenny Moore easily should have cracked the top 100. And, again, based on this, should have crept his way all the way up to 80. This one's going to be controversial. But again, going based on stat-for-stat comparison, Deebo Samuel is ranked 81. And yet, stat for stat, this is what we're going off of, Michael Pittman is a better receiver, statistically speaking, with a worse quarterback and a worse system right now than Deebo Samuel. Pittman had one more game, had 109 receptions for 1,152 yards, whereas Deebo had 60 receptions for 892 yards. So that's a 300-yard difference between the two. Obviously, Deebo edges him out as far as rushing, but they don't use Michael Pittman in the same way that they use Deebo Samuel. So I would say that they could be closer. But I do think, again, if you're going based on statistically as a wide receiver, Michael Pittman should have cracked the top 100 and made his way up to 81 based on this stat for stat. Now, I know that that's problematic and you can't do that. But here's the biggest one. The biggest one that really bothered me was that DeForest Buckner didn't make the list. And yet, stat for stat, had a better season last year and has better seasons in previous years than Aleem McNeil at 89, than Christian Wilkins at 78, than Jeffrey Simmons, who was ranked at 95. He should have crept his way all the way up to at least 78. Going against Christian Williams, he had the same amount of games. He had the same amount of average tackles. He had one less sack, but he had 45 solo tackles, one more forced fumble, and one less fumble recovery. So really comparable between the two. And I, again, say that because DeForest has more stats going in his favor, specifically on tackles, and only one less sack on them, I would say DeForest Buckner easily wins that. And then you look at Jeffrey Simmons. Against Jeffrey Simmons, he has more average tackles per games. He has more sacks, more solo tackles, more forced fumbles, more fumble recoveries. Head-to-head, he's 2-0 versus him in this year. You're telling me that, I don't understand how they made this list, but to say that DeForest Buckner doesn't crack that is insane to me. Now, they did here's the difficult one, because they did make, Derrick Henry did make the list, and Jonathan Taylor did not make the list. I'm not as upset about that, though I think Jonathan Taylor should have easily made the list, but due to a shortened season last year for Jonathan Taylor, a less workload, they were still trying to get him back and make sure he was good, make sure he was healthy. I mean, he split a lot of the carries even still with Zach Moss. I'm not super upset about the fact that Jonathan Taylor didn't make the list, though I feel like he is a better running back right now than Derrick Henry. And then a lot of other guys. I think Jonathan Taylor right now has potential, if healthy, to be a top 5 running back in football. I'm very curious to see how he's going to rank this year. But again, that is 6 Colts players that stat for stat are better than their comparisons and yet didn't make the list. A couple of them made the honorable mentions, but this is just once again a chip on the shoulder of the Indianapolis Colts that I hope that they see this. I hope that they care and take note that the NFL is still not giving them their dues, still not giving them their respect, even though their projected win total was 4 last year, even though I think it was 3.5. They're still projected to get a top 10 pick this year, or top 5 pick this year even. The NFL is still not paying enough attention to the Indianapolis Colts. I saw an article yesterday that listed the Colts as a dark horse to make the playoffs. I think, optimistically speaking, and really being realist, to make the playoffs should not even be the goal. I think the Indianapolis Colts have potential and have a good enough roster and a good enough head coach to be able, if Anthony Richardson can stay healthy. And again, I went over so much film of his even today. I'm so excited. I feel like we were robbed to not have him the full season last year. If he can continue, even in his first couple of games, to be able to take the slides, don't take the hits, but to be able to take the slides, I think there's so much that the Indianapolis Colts are going to be able to do. I'm so excited to see second-year defensive backs. I'm so excited to see even the first-year defensive backs that we're bringing in. This season is going to be really, really good, and I'm so glad that people are not paying enough attention to the Indianapolis Colts because, again, they're creeping up. And statistically, these guys are up there. They're killing it. And I think that this is yet another reason to be excited about this season because, I mean, they're not only should they have been in the top 100, but they shouldn't have even been in the 90s. They shouldn't even been in the 80s. Michael Pittman was up there with a number 80 ranked wide receiver. Kenny Moore was up there with the number 80 ranked Derek Stingley. And DeForest Buckner was up there with the 70s of defensive tackles. And I still think, like I said, Quentin Nelson, there were so many offensive linemen on here. Offensive line is such a weird position to try and get grades on. I know people have done it, but I think Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, that's one thing we're not talking about enough. There were like 4 centers on this list, and Ryan Kelly wasn't one of them, and I think that is atrocious and egregious. I think Ryan Kelly should have made the top 100 as well. So that's 7. 7 Indianapolis Colts that I think should have made the top 100. It was a flurry of San Francisco 49ers. Really, there weren't a lot of Jags either. Not that I'm advocating for the Jags by any means, but I am saying that I think that this is yet another reason to get excited about this season, because the Indianapolis Colts are going to come, and they're going to come with a vengeance, and I'm super, super excited to see it this season.